Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. We now transition for the first time from the SEC to the Big Ten. Let's talk about perhaps a team that has lost a lot of its luster now because of the Big Ten's conference realignment situation. Now, this team's massive hurdles and pratfalls in the recent past and beating Ohio State and Michigan have become large. Because now you incorporate a lot of Pac-12 teams, a lot of travel situations into this new schedule. But Penn State certainly has a lot of appeal to it. They have one of the best college football home environments in the country. They have a coach in James Franklin who, even though hasn't necessarily kept them on schedule or ahead of schedule in terms of beating Ohio State and Michigan, has kept the course and stayed the course in terms of hitting 10-win seasons. And maybe as a Penn State player and as a Penn State coach, 10 wins should be enough. But conference realignment really does mess with things. But in positive aspects, maybe Penn State dodged a bullet here. Without further ado, let's talk about them a little bit because they become now the wild card, the monkey wrench in the Big Ten, so to speak. Now, if you're a Penn State fan, there's a reason for you to have a lot of trepidations surrounding what you saw out of the offense last year, surrounding what you saw out of Drew Aller last year. For someone with so much hope, so much optimism surrounding him at the QB position, a position where, Penn State really hasn't placed a lot of faith in terms of recruiting big-name QBs, to have someone like Drew Aller, who is a 5-star recruit, play like that, not necessarily pass a lot, all the frustrations with running the football, even though you do have fantastic running backs now. I do get why people wouldn't be high on Penn State, but this is a team that has consistently hit the 10-win threshold time and time again, only not losing to Ohio State and Michigan, and now that doesn't necessarily matter. And here's why I'm more high on Penn State. I'm taking the over on them. The over on them is about 9.5. They don't play Michigan or Oregon this year. And Oregon is the only team from the Pac-12 that I feel like right now will compete for the Big Ten title and those odds there. When I look at the rest of their schedule, I only see 2 games where they could potentially find fault with. They're away at USC. That should be a very intriguing game because these are 2 quarterbacks in drastically different points of their careers. Drew Aller with a point to prove, and Miller Moss with a point to prove that he should be the quarterback of the future for USC. And so that game really, if Penn State doesn't get dragged into that a little bit, then I do believe that they have a chance to get that win. And then they're home to Ohio State. And there's no better home environment, like I said, than Happy Valley. And Ohio State, yes, they're probably going to be a tough team to play, getting all the hype. But at the end of the day, like I say, they're just good on paper. Doesn't mean anything to me if they don't win all their games. Doesn't mean anything right now. And so Penn State has to say, hey, if they're sitting pretty, let's say Penn State is undefeated. They don't have a tough, non-conference or conference slate. Let's say if they're about undefeated before they face Ohio State. They'll be like, hey, no matter where Ohio State is, remember, these guys all transferred in. They have a Ibuka, but these are just young guys. Will Howard's a transfer. He is the question mark here. That should be the message for them. And if they get past those 2 teams, that's it. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. If they get past those 2 teams, they don't play the only other 2 teams in this conference who shouldn't matter. And so that's why I believe that Penn State has good odds here. Remember, there's no longer divisions either in the conference. You no longer have to win the Big Ten East or West. You just have to be the second best team in your conference. And well, with Oregon also being in the mix, if Penn State is there and thereabouts, you should be a high seed in the CFP at the very least. Now, I think the bigger odds here for Penn State are the odds to get to the Big Ten conference game. And I think that their 50% odds speak a lot to the top heaviness of the conference. Because right now, all the hype's looking at Ohio State. You have Oregon up there. Maybe Michigan if they figure things out. But Penn State should take advantage of that. And so, I would say that Penn State right now perhaps have one of the better bets to reach the conference championship game. But let's talk about this roster a little bit more. Let's talk about Drew Aller. Only 2,000 yards, not the best in his first season as a starter. I think that this year, though, under new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, there's going to be a lot more verbiage in the system. I like what Andy Kotelnicki did at Kansas. And when I think about all the pieces that Penn State have, it certainly reminds me of what Kansas does, right? Drew Aller isn't necessarily a dual-threat quarterback like a Jalen Daniels or a Jason Bean, but the running backs that they had also played a big role. When I look at Penn State, their strength is in their running backs, Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Kaytron Allen certainly looks like a beast. And when I think about Penn State, that's who they lean on. Saquon Barkley before, Kaytron Allen, Nicholas Singleton now. And so, what I really like about all of the changes that they made is that they look at teams that they're very similar to them, and they said, if we hire this guy, what could our team be like? And I think the sky's the limit for this Penn State offense. If, Andy Kotelnicki finds the right balance between allowing Drew Aller more freedom to pass the ball down the field and also implementing a lot more of the run game. And I think the best way to go for Penn State is a lot of screen action. Just getting Drew settled down early and often, and then it opens up a lot more variation down the field. And then another big question is, well, who's the wide receiver one? Because I don't necessarily see one. Is it Julian Fleming, the former Ohio State player? Then you have freshmen Ethan Black and Josiah Brown looking to get implemented, so who knows? A lot of newness to this offense. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. But at the end of the day, looking at the schedule, there's no way you tell me that a team that their only worry is, well, we can't beat Ohio State and Michigan, and that is set it back. Now in a new-look 12-team CFP, not playing one of those teams, not playing another team in terms of conference realignment who's the biggest challenge to them. And the only two games are away at USC, where I think they should be a favorite, depending on how Miller Moss looks earlier in the season, and home to Ohio State in an environment so amped up and hyped around all these Penn State games that could really create tension for Ohio State. Should they be off to a rocky start, well, with Will Howard coming in as a transfer, you can't tell me that Penn State can't take advantage of this. Now, I know that when we look at the profile of all the conferences and how the selection committee will view certain conferences, the SEC will get first precedence. But 3 teams from the Big Ten, you think Ohio State will be the conference champion, or even Oregon, and then there's 2 kind of spots there. And who cares if it's, a lower seed or a higher seed? You're in. And that was always the goal for Penn State. And especially now that it's divisionless in terms of the Big Ten, all Penn State has to do is win the games they should. And I think, with this new offensive setup, a lot of games, whether it be non-conference or conference games you expect to win that looked shaky last year, might be a little more easy to win this year. And it's all about getting Drew Aller comfortable, because all the hype in the world can't necessarily save, a quarterback who's not comfortable. So that's the key there. But let's say that Penn State do sneak in. That's where I think the road will end for them. Because all these SEC teams really feel like they have something to prove. LSU only made one playoff. Ole Miss has never been. Missouri's never been. Texas A&M, if they get there, have never been. So Penn State is in a position where if you get in, you have to guarantee your place there. I'm taking the over in terms of wins at 9.5. I'm taking that over. But just so you know, that's where the road will probably end. The playoffs for them. But, like I said, taking stock in knowing that Penn State's path is much easier, I would be foolish to not tell you to bet on the over. Also, for a team that has done this several times and just hasn't beaten Ohio State and Michigan, pick the over for Penn State, but don't pick them in the CFP. That's my advice. But coming next, speaking of debutantes in the CFP, for the first time in the history of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast and this particular group of segments, we talk about a group of 5 team that should ignite into the playoffs. Hint, hint there. To close out the show in the week after the break.